All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Crossing Swords. As always, I'm Andrew.
And as very rarely, I'm Jake.
You say very rarely, but pretty much every episode now you say that, or you just go, "Yeah, I'm just Jake this way. Just going to try it just this once."
That's just lies. Why would you do that? Why would you come at me like that?
Well, I just feel like you're lying to our audience, and I know we treat them with a bit of disdain, but you know.
And look, in terms of rarity, for those on YouTube,
no guitar. Fuck, there's no guitar, yeah.
No guitar. Because I wasn't ready to go from the start. I wasn't sitting here waiting. I had to get myself ready.
You weren't prepared.
Well, am I or aren't I?
Probably knowing you're not.
Time will see. I'm a huge procrastinator. Look, we decided what we were going to talk about probably 4 or 5 days ago, 3-4 days ago. When did I start looking into it? Last night, obviously.
Absolutely. Do you know the thing was? I literally had half an hour at work when we decided it, so I spent half an hour just sort of jotting down some notes, and that was it. Didn't revisit it after that.
Makes you know what? Once you've made your mind up, you go.
Yeah,
you're a man.
And to be honest, sort of. I do. If you ask my missus, she would say no. She's like, he makes zero decisions. But anyway, so this week, guys, we're choosing a bit of a different one. It's not something we've really discussed before, but it's something
with ourselves, really.
No, I think we've sort of touched on it a couple of times, but never
very
really
lightly.
In depth. And it's basically what we'd like to be taught in schools. So we're going to talk about a little bit what's being taught at the moment, what our issues with that is, and then I suppose ways we possibly improve it, but in specific actual subjects and things we'd like to be taught in schools to children, to teenagers, and you know, that sort of jazz. So without any further ado, Jake, would you like to start us off?
May I?
Absolutely.
It's very rare I get to.
He says that after last week I let him start. It's fucking professional.
Mate, what is this? As soon as I say anything, you're like, that fucking always happens, man. You're such a liar.
Well, stop lying then. Do you know what I mean?
Man, you just stop gaslighting me.
Just give the people what they want, Jay.
It's provocative. It gets the people going. So let's look a little bit at what's taught. So they're split up. The current curriculum in the UK is split up into key stages, 4 key stages.
Okay.
By year groups and by age groups. So year groups 1 and 2, with the age range of 5 to 7, they're key stage 1. Then 7 to 11. Key stage 2, 11 to 14, key stage 3, 14 to 16, which is years 10 and 11, is key stage 4.
Yeah, so that's what your GCSE age, isn't it?
Throughout all of them, the 3 core subjects, obviously, that are being taught are math, science, English.
Yeah.
And they're generally split up the same way they always have been: English into literature and language, of which you get taught both. Yeah. Science into the 3 sciences: physics, chemistry, and biology, right?
Yeah.
Also, at all ages, they're taught, generally speaking, physical education.
Yes.
Because we can't let kids get fat, right? Or they're too fat and we've got to stop them. I can't remember where we land on that, but it's one of those.
I think the idea was just kids should be active in general. I don't think at the time it was invented they were probably worried about kids being fat.
Quite. Now, interestingly, some subjects are offered only up to a certain point, whereby after that they're optional, if that makes sense. So most of them, so for example, I'm going to go through these. There's only one other subject, by the way, that I didn't mention that is taught across all 4 key stages as mandatory, and that's computing, IT, ICT.
Okay.
Which, given the world we live in, makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah. To be fair, though, my nephew's 6. He knows how to work it all now.
Yeah.
You know, he had an iPad at 3 and he could work it. So, you know, I don't know whether it's mandatory to teach kids.
Possibly, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff, you know, like kids are probably not going to be that hot on, you know, some of them might be on web design.
I suppose in sort of traditional programs, perhaps like using things like Word, PowerPoint.
Well, any of the office ones, yeah. How many kids are using outside of school? Everything else is pretty much taught So these are the subjects I'm just going to rattle through and that are taught up until years 9. After that, in the GCSE years, they're optional,
So
but they
what's
are
that, up
taught up
until
until
like
then.
14 or something?
So up until 14, yeah, you're taught these, and then they're optional. So they are art and design,
Yeah.
design and technology, geography, history, music, and religious education. Which, by the way, religious education is actually apparently now mandatory across all 4 stages. And actually, do you know what it was
Okay.
when I was at school? I'm just thinking about that because I got
Well, yeah,
a
I
B in
had
my
to
first.
I had to sit RE exams in
Yeah, I got a B in my
Key
first
Stage
mock
4.
exam in year 10. Then I got a C in my mock exam in year
You
11,
did
and then
better
for
than
my
me,
actually,
mate.
and no, well then for my actual exam I got a D. So I've gradually showed less
I think
interest in
I got an
geography.
F in my GCSE for RE. I think that's how much effort I didn't like. Honestly, I didn't revise a lot in general, but in terms of for RE, which was a subject I didn't care much for, yeah,
I always remember you couldn't help but make the same joke whenever the teacher gave you, because my teachers always, like, I know this sounds really like possibly comes across, but my teachers for the most part generally believed that I could and should be achieving some really good grades.
yeah.
So, when he'd hand me like a C or a D or something, he'd be like, really, you'll bet, just apply yourself a little bit more. And the
Mm.
response was always something along the lines of like, it's the way God wills it. What can you do?
That's theologically offensive, Jake, and I don't like it.
Yeah, no,
We
it's
may very well have religious listeners. Do you know what I mean?
no, and they'll know that God intends me to be this way, or all the gods.
There's only
And therein
one
lies the
God,
problem.
Jake. There's only
How
one
many how
God.
many gods are we listening to?
But yeah, so what other subjects?
That's pretty much it. Then you get a mix where they're not taught in the earlier years, but are taught in later years. So there's 2 subjects that are taught from years 7 onwards. So in high school,
Mm.
from the ages of 11 onwards. And these are 2. So sex and relationship education,
Okay.
which is very important, I think, and should be taught. Yeah, from year 11, from the age of 11 is probably about right to start having those conversations. Just to introduce you to your body, because you're about to go through puberty as well. So it's not just about
I
the
think
act of
that's too
sex.
late.
Possibly. I mean, very possibly. But the key stage 2 starts at age 7. So is that then too early, or is that early enough for you?
I just feel for sex education, there's been quite a few studies done, and a lot of the countries that are quite progressive and have quite low
Start earlier.
teenage pregnancy rates all start at anywhere from 6 years old upwards. And I think we should probably do the same. We're still
I
one
think
of
the
the
key.
worst countries in the world for teenage pregnancies. It's improving,
I
don't get me wrong, but
Well,
we're
I
still
think the
one.
key to sex education is not so much when it's taught, it's what is taught. I think we're still very much old school. Obviously, we haven't been at school for a few years, but my understanding generally is that it's still very much like the old school, in that it's like, rolling a condom on a cucumber and, just a bunch of giggling teenagers laughing
Yeah,
at everything. But really, we should be being taught, okay, let's teach about actual sex. I'm not saying let's watch porn. That would be unbelievably controversial. Can you imagine the uproar from parents if I, as a headmaster, was
MILF
showing their
Hunters
young
free.
11-year-old children porn? I'm like, guys, let me give you a quick recap of the first 2. Then we'll jump straight in. But
Watch Anal Virgin 6. Do you know what I mean?
but the difference is teaching kids the differences between, particularly for the boys, but girls as well, but particularly the differences between porn sex and real sex, because the one thing that you don't get in porn sex that I think is
Absolutely.
quite telling is consent.
Mm.
Because generally the idea is in porn they're consenting anyway. But even if, obviously there are some scenarios where they're like, quote unquote rape scenarios or
Yeah.
coercion scenarios. But even
Yeah.
in the not like that, there's no consent given throughout. And that kind of impacts, then kids are taught, well, if you actually have to consent, it takes away from the, again, quote unquote, the moment.
Mm.
So teaching about that, teaching about the fact that sex is not always this amazing, pleasurable thing. There's a lot of really awkward moments, and there's a lot of really funny moments.
Yeah.
Just teaching the reality of it.
I think it has to be an open dialogue first and foremost, because I think one of the biggest issues is there's a lot of stigma around it. It's still very taboo to talk about. I think most parents would be uncomfortable talking to their children about it. So I think this is something, as a society as a whole, the attitude has to change around. And
Mm.
the way that will start is by, I think, the education system having to be quite progressive with it. Because to be honest, at the moment, I think parents probably wouldn't allow a more progressive sex education in schools at the moment currently, if we were
No,
being honest.
also one of the things I teach in sort of sex and relationships, and I know this all we're talking about really is steering on the sex side rather than the relationship side. But the one thing I'd really drive home as well is about perhaps teaching the finances of having a baby and a child, and the fact
Yeah,
that, you know, even though you might say, right, well, I'm out of the picture, I'm running away and whatever, you know, through the courts, the parent that's been sort of saddled with the child can actually force you into helping financially
yeah, absolutely,
and showing that
absolutely.
actually, you know, unless you want a baby, it's a good idea to wrap up and use or use alternative contraceptions.
Hmm. No, absolutely. I think I'd agree with that.
I think there's still an idea for a lot of, you know, we can't speak from the perspective of a female, but I think from the male perspective, there's this idea that that, you know, if you get a girl pregnant, you can kind of leave.
Um,
Not from a moral from a moral standpoint, you know, I'd have always sort of stayed. Sounds a bit harsh, but do you know what I mean? But I think there's this idea that practically speaking, you can kind of go.
I honestly don't know, because I think that's never been something in my mindset. And it certainly wasn't how I was raised. Um, but yeah, I suppose technically speaking, that could be correct. Um, I don't think like you'll ever be able to stop absentee fathers. I
No, of
think
course you can't. And you
perhaps we
can't
do
stop.
need to talk about the morals of sex and relationships and having a child and stuff like that, and that all needs to be involved with it.
I think
But I would perhaps say a lot of that needs to come from the family side as much as the educational.
I think the key to education as a whole is with all the terms that you're trying to prevent, you know, trying to make people financially aware so that they don't end up in debt or in a precarious situation. All that, you can't stop it, but the more you educate, the more you can reduce the chance that it's going to happen.
Oh no, absolutely. The
And
truth, the truth is though, as I've seen from people I know, that like they don't necessarily just make a mistake once and continue to make it.
no,
You'll get people that are far from stupid and are far from ignorant that will have perhaps gone through the situation once, it not perhaps gone as well as it could have, and then they go and do it again, and you're just like, oh, just
no, but equally as well, you know, if we teach these kids, I know, you know, I agree with you, it does come from home. If we teach this generation a little better, then with the
oh,
next generation,
absolutely.
there's a little
Oh,
more
absolutely.
coming from the
No,
home
that's
side, and
why
then again going on and on.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
Also,
Um,
the other,
and I don't like the arguments you hear from people that say things like, "Oh, the thoughts of sex aren't in a child's mind, so why would we put them there?" Russell Kane, the comedian, said something perfect. He's like, "Well, they don't think of Henry VIII either, so should we not teach them about him?"
it's a good point. It's a very valid point. And also the other thing I want to teach relationships and sex is uh, all the and this is where it has been controversial. We know it's been controversial. Is teaching the LGBT plus spectrum. So teaching about aromantics and asexuals, teaching about
Oh, don't. I
homosexual
mean,
relationships, teaching
I've
about
been
all that stuff.
really surprised with conversations I've had with certain people that I know about how unopen people still are
Mm.
to the whole spectrum in general, like how worried they are about how it affect their children. Kids couldn't care less. Do you know what I mean? Like
No, we
kids will,
teach them to not like it.
yeah,
We
exactly.
implant
A
that on
kid
them.
isn't born racist or prejudiced or anything like that. Like once I was interested because it was just a sort of an experiment, because someone said to me, "Oh, you know, certain kids from certain backgrounds are more predisposed more
They're more
likely to be racist or predisposed. I know, I give up, can't do it. So I decided to ask my nephew a question once, and I said to him, how many black children do you have in your class at school? And he looked at me and was like, what? And I was like, how many black kids do you have in your class? And he was like, what's a black kid? And so I then had to explain to him
the idea
what a
of
black
race.
person, and he was like, oh. And he's like, we've got quite a few. And I was like, all right, are you friends with any of them? He was like, yeah, pretty much all. Like, he had no idea what a black person even was. And it'd be the same if you explained to him what a gay person was or something like that, he would just be
Just go,
like,
okay, cool.
all right, yeah, no worries.
Yeah, and there's, you hear stories and you see kids and videos of kids' reactions all the time where people explain to them gay relationships and they just kind of go, oh, okay, what are we
Yeah,
having for dinner? And do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it really is that simple because it's really easy to understand. And I'd also teach the mechanics of like, for example, gay sex, because it's the same as heterosexual sex in that, like, if we don't give these kids an education, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do some damage either
well, yeah,
emotionally or physically.
well, yeah, and that's how you can end up with things like the AIDS epidemic and things like that
Well, any kind of STD, and
through
it's
lack
like
of understanding and education.
and also, the whole thing of, any kind of sex, if you do it wrong, it can hurt because, let's face it, the parts of the body we're using are very sensitive parts.
Yes, yes.
So let's teach them to do it in a way that is slightly more enjoyable. And if we don't, because that's the thing, I think back to when I did sex ed as a kid, I guess I still am in many ways. But as a student, when I did sex ed, I thought, I only think about it now retroactively, but as a gay, like if I was gay, none of
You
that
would
would have been of any
no,
use
no,
to
no,
me.
not at all.
And I would have
No,
gone
not
into
at all.
sexual and emotional relationships and made all the mistakes because I had none of the education brought to
Well,
me.
to be quite honest with you, I went up being a straight man. I went into and I had sex education, and looking back, it was a one-time deal. Like
Yes,
you literally have the
someone
lesson
came into the
once,
school and went,
and that's it.
"That's how you put a condom on."
Yeah, and that's it. And I went into relationships at a young age, to be honest with you, having no real idea of what was going to happen. And I ended up getting a lot of my education from the internet, watching porn and things like that. And then I was lucky enough to have a relationship with my dad, for example, that I could go and ask him questions if I was confused about anything, if I didn't understand anything. And a lot of people might think that's weird, but I think, you know, especially considering how little information we get given from the people that
Mm.
should be teaching us and stuff like that. I thought, well, he's my dad. Who better to? He's had kids, so surely he's been there and done it. But I don't think a lot of people are lucky enough to have that situation where they might be able to go and talk to their parents.
No, I remember just the other week or whatever, my mum just sat there and she said, just almost out of the blue, she was like, "The thing about my tits," and I was like, "Whoa, whoa, that
So
is not
finish
a
your sentence.
conversation I'm
What,
prepared
what
to have."
what is the thing with your mum's tits, Jake?
You'd have to ask her.
Oh, I will, and I
And
reckon
do you know
she'd
what?
tell me.
I'm sure she'd tell you. I reckon she
Yeah,
would tell you.
absolutely. I think she would. Your mum's awesome. She's quite open.
Not that open though. Okay, don't start bringing key bowls
Whoa,
round
whoa,
and shit
whoa,
like that.
whoa, whoa. I would never insult your mum in such a manner.
Anyway, sex and relationships. There's only one other subject that's taught mandatory from years 7 onwards, and that is this very blanket term, which I don't like so much. And this is where my gripe comes in of what I'd like to sort of change in the curriculum is citizenship. They call it.
Okay.
Now, what that covers is just about everything you can think of. So you can imagine how much there is to fit into those years where you get, maybe one lesson a week. And it really is, they don't get many lessons of these. So you imagine how much they've got to fit in and how briefly you'll touch
Did
on
we
each
have
subject.
this when we were in school? I don't remember
It was
citizenship.
introduced right near the end.
Okay.
And I remember, like, for us, what it was we had a game where you were randomly assigned a job. on this big board, and then you had to go and find a house with your budget, and you had to try and find.
Oh, see, do you know what? I think because I'm a couple of years
You know,
older
you would
than
have
you,
missed it.
I think I've missed this. I have no idea.
And what it's expanded into is that's literally it, and that's about the level they touch upon, because you've got such to fit in. So they touch upon, society and your
Your
involvement
place
in
in it.
society. They talk about the sort of the political history. So when they do politics, they talk about the political history and the whole point of the democratic process, that kind of thing. They talk about budgeting and finances, but again, they just touch on it because you've got so much to fit
Yeah,
in.
I had none of this because I've actually got several of those things sort of on my list of what I'd like taught in school.
And that's what they've done. So there's been many campaigns of which I've sort of been, I wouldn't say very actively involved in, but I have been involved in some campaigns, but certainly for financial education.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's happened is the government, the government have kind of gone on the education board and said, okay, we'll include them. Bang, there's your lot. It's all there under citizenship. And
Mm.
it's like, well, it's a start, but there's a lot further to go. So I imagine that covers a lot of your
Yeah, it does. I
expertise.
wanted
Jump off on it.
financial systems to be far more, or to be educated far more to children, like things like credit cards. What's a credit card? Why would you get one? Pros, cons, that sort of thing. Understanding things like pensions, why you're going to have one when you're likely to get it, that sort of thing.
Well, do you know what?
Um,
Sorry to interrupt. It's just occurred to me. Shall I read you the aims and the things that are taught at the different stages
yeah,
for
yeah, go for it.
citizenship? So the aim is to ensure that all pupils acquire a sound knowledge and understanding of how the United Kingdom is governed, its political systems, and how citizens participate actively in its democratic systems of government. Develop a sound knowledge and understanding of the role of law and the justice system in our society and how laws are shaped and enforced. Develop an interest in and commitment to participation in volunteering, as well as other forms of responsible activity that they will take with them into adulthood, and are equipped with the skills to think critically and debate political questions to enable them to manage their money on a day-to-day basis and plan for future and financial needs. At Key Stage 3, so this is up to the age of 14, so 11 to 14,
Yeah,
people should be taught about the developing political system and the roles of the citizens, the parliament, and the monarch.
yeah,
The operation of parliament, including voting in elections and the role of political parties. The precious liberties enjoyed by the citizens of the United Kingdom. The nature of rules and law and the justice system, including the role of the police and the operation of courts and tribunals. The roles played by public institutions and voluntary groups in society, and the ways which citizens work together to improve their communities, including opportunities to participate in school-based activities, and the functions and uses of money, the importance of practice and budgeting, and of managing risk. Then from years 14 to 16, from the ages of 14 to 16, they're taught again about the government and the constitution and the power of account and the different roles of the executive, legislative, and judiciary, and
okay,
of the free press. By the way, that's just chucked in there as like an additional thing. The different electoral system used in and beyond the UK, and actions that citizens can take in those processes to influence decisions locally, nationally, and internationally. Other systems and forms of government, both democratic and non-democratic, outside of the UK. Local, regional, and international governments, the United Kingdom's relationship with the rest of Europe, the Commonwealth, and the United Nations, which probably won't matter after this year. Human rights and international law. The legal system in the UK, the different sources of law and how law helps society deal with complex problems. Diverse national, regional, religious, and ethnic identities in the UK, and the need for mutual respect and understanding, the different ways in which a citizen can contribute to the improvement of his or her community, including the opportunity to participate actively in community volunteering, and income and expenditure, credit and debt, insurance, saving, pensions, financial products, services, and how public money is raised. Imagine fitting all that in like one lesson a week in 2 years.
well, it'd be impossible, wouldn't it?
It's
I mean,
mental.
what they're covering, like that description, sounds, to be honest with you, spot on. I don't have an issue with what they're
Would that be
covering,
taught?
but well, that's the question. Is that actually being taught?
No,
Have they
absolutely.
got enough? Because to be honest, for the amount they're covering, you could 2 or 3
It's a lot.
lessons a week, wouldn't you? You would have thought maybe
Mm.
more.
Well, I
Um,
think we're both in agreement that I think finances should have its own lesson.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I
And there's a
would
lot
say
to cover in finances.
I think citizenship should only cover, for me, probably our political system and our role as the average person in it. I would say that's probably what citizenship should cover. Finances should probably be a large section under maths, which is probably different aspects of it should be taught each year or something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
agree. Each semester,
Um,
this week we're doing, this semester we're doing savings and budgeting. Next semester we're doing pensions.
yeah,
Pension after that we're doing taxes. We're doing,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, that sounds like a better way to do it. I think shoving
Absolutely agree.
all of that under one umbrella feels a bit forced. And like you said, if it's
Very.
just one lesson a week, then like you're still not going to have enough um, afterwards. Because I would say probably in general, as we've probably seen, the current younger generation is more politically engaged by a large amount than ours was or is, to be honest, in my opinion. I mean, just when we went on that environmental demonstration outside Parliament, there was a lot of young people, which was
Mm.
really,
Well,
really
the
nice to
environment's a
see.
big issue for the kids.
Yeah, but
And I
they definitely,
noticed that.
but I do think they're definitely more politically engaged than we were.
Mm,
While you were describing citizenship, part of me wondered, is stuff like that part of it? Because we didn't get that sort of education, and even maybe a little bit is better than nothing because it's making
I
enough
think
children interested to be engaged, or is it just they are more engaged because there's more issues for their
for
generation
me,
than there is ours?
before I kind of let you get on to your list of things you'd like introduced to the curriculum and or perhaps expanded upon within the curriculum, I would say the main thing that I really want to use is that the political systems, the way it works, the way the party's system works, the way the various constituencies work and all that stuff, and the difference between local elections and general elections and all that stuff. For me, that's a prelude. That's an introduction into um, the current political landscape. I think we should be talked about these things because I think it does two things. And perhaps I know I'm being somewhat of an idealist here, but one, it teaches us from an early age to start living with the fact that there are other people with different political views and we can get along with them in a civil way.
Yeah,
And also it I think the big problem with politics and the people, and has been always, certainly all my lifetime and beyond, is that people feel intimidated by it. They feel intimidated by
absolutely.
the
And I
language they
think
use.
that's
They feel
done
like
deliberately,
they
though.
don't know what's happening. Absolutely. So I think the schools, if we teach them in schools about current events and the ways they can stay up on it with just a little article here and there, a little glance at the news once a week kind of thing,
Mm,
without making it their life, but being able to keep up enough to be engaged and not be, you know, if they're going to have the wool pulled over their eyes, make it bloody hard to do so.
yeah.
Um, I think that's one of the things we should be teaching from a young age to people to engage in the current political landscape.
No, I mean, I would absolutely agree with you. Part of me wonders whether the fact they've now included it in the curriculum, even in particular in a small way, plays into the narrative of people being undereducated because
Mm.
they can say that they're doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we are educating our children. They are getting that. But in reality, it's. I think what frustrates me with our educational system in general, having left it and being now an adult, is how inequipped it leaves you
For the actual adult world, yeah.
for everything, and not
Yeah.
just politically, financial, but just in every walk of life. Nothing about school,
Also,
other than the
citizenship.
fact you get bullied or things like that, and the world's a shit place. Does it prepare you for it in any way whatsoever?
To me, one of the things I'd also like to see introduced to citizenship, and this can be just a literally touched upon, one lesson, two lessons. Like I
Mm.
don't think it's a big deal, but how to apply for jobs.
Yeah.
So making sure that kids know, word it in the right way depending on the job you're applying for. Make sure you rearrange your CV so that the things that they're looking for
Mm.
right at the top of your list of skills and abilities
I,
and
I think
things like
also, and
that.
I
And
can't
writing a CV.
I can't speak to how school is now because obviously I'm not in school, but from pretty much as far back as I can remember, the narrative when you're in school is go to university. And the attitude was very much if you're not going to university, you've sort of failed.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I would say some of the most successful people I've known after school have not gone to university. Um, and so I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed in school, that the only option isn't, because now, for example, our society is crying out for people with practical skills, people who can do manual labour, people who can, an electrician, a gas fitter, a carpenter, all those sort of trades we are short on now, because the emphasis has been go to uni, and we've had a generation of people that have gone to uni and studied things that, quite frankly, are a complete waste of
And
time.
this is where it gets a bit conspiratorial and woke on my side, a bit hippie on my end, is that I believe that the narrative to push to go to university is mostly because of the fact that a lot of this is on both sides of the political spectrum, on the left and the right, Labour and Tory. A lot of them have interest and friends who have investments in universities, and they make a lot of money.
Very
And
probably,
it's like,
very
let's
probably.
make some money. 10 grand a year it is now, near
Yeah,
enough.
yeah, it's obscene. And I know, I've known of not loads, but quite a few people that have said to me they wish they'd never gone to uni,
Yeah, just picked up
because
an apprenticeship or something.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I feel like that's a major part of it that needs to be changed, because when you're during the school period, it felt like you were meant to look down on people who did manual labour jobs or general working class jobs as a whole. There's something wrong with that. If you haven't gone on to do something else or go on to uni, then you were somehow failing. And I think that's a really sad thing to be teaching people, because you end up with a situation where the working classes are still looked down on. And
Yeah, and they always will. And also the thing is that when you come fresh out of uni, the problem is that employers aren't looking for someone with a degree; they're looking for someone with education, with
experience.
experience.
Yeah,
If they've got a degree as well, that's great. But they're looking for someone with experience. Someone with
yeah.
experience will always get the job. Not always. 99 times out of 100 will get the
No,
job
no,
over.
no, no. It's and also the thing is, particularly if it's not an area that requires a degree. Like, for example, I was in a position where I was hiring people once, and there was one guy that applied, like massively overqualified, clearly an intelligent guy, and like he had a first in maths, or it was something like, I was like, fucking hell, like this guy must be brainy as hell. But I didn't hire him because, I mean, first of all, I was like, well, one, he's never worked in retail, so that doesn't really help me. And I was like, secondly, with those sort of qualifications, I'm going to put time and effort into training him, and he's going to fuck off soon. He's going to go on to something else.
Yeah, it does
Uh,
sort of work. In unless it's specifically in a field related to your degree,
mm,
it does sort of work against you a little bit.
no,
And
absolutely.
I found that having gone to university, I've had, you don't, as you and I know, you don't get many rejection letters or phone calls, but I have had more than one rejection letter that says that we think you're overqualified for the role.
Yeah, which is silly. Which is silly, really.
Yeah, and I was fuming at the time. I was like,
But coming from someone who perhaps work in an industry that is considered lower down, you don't want to hire someone that you think in a few months' time is going to be looking for
hmm.
something else. And
No, I do get
um,
it.
I know, but I can imagine as the person applying, it must be really fucking annoying.
Yeah, it feels like when you're a kid and the teacher tells you you're too good for the football team.
Yeah. Oh, have
That's
you
what it feels a
experienced
bit
that a
of.
lot? Have you?
Do you know what? I can't help it. When I turn up on the pitch, kids just get left in the dust, and it's just not fair to them.
Wow.
Everyone wants to touch the
So
ball, and
what
I can't
happened,
let them.
Jake? So what happened?
Well, I had to go and sit and do some colouring in on my own, didn't I?
No, no, but I mean, what happened since? Because you're not that good at football now.
Well, I wasn't allowed to play and continue my education, was I? I wasn't allowed to go on training.
But right, anyway, there's a couple of things I'd like to be taught more in school. I want practical life skills. Like, for example, for me, DT was a complete design and technology was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, I'll
You
be honest.
know,
I've never. I would happily have DT as just an optional extra, because I have never ever been like, do you know what, I need to make. This is what I made for my DT. We made a wooden car, and we started with the
yeah.
chassis, and then we did. And I was like, I've never ever been like, I need to get two bits of wood and glue them together. I need to saw them up, sand them down, and glue them. Never.
did Did you ever do the metal figure man?
No, I didn't, but I'm aware of
We
it. And
did that. We had one lesson where he spent 20 minutes telling us how to wire a plug. And for the life of me, I wish they'd have done it properly because that would come in so handy now. But for example, keep DT, but add more practical things like putting up shelves, hanging wallpaper, painting, decorating, things like that that everyone will use in everyday life. You know, putting units together,
minor
anything
repairs.
yeah, anything remotely
Mm.
practical, teach that instead. Teaching me how to make a metal man, which one I wouldn't remember how to do now anyway. But we spent 6 months making a metal man.
And it was nothing. No, and do you know what the thing is?
Like,
We both know. I mean, you certainly know. We both know a carpenter who absolutely has had the need to sand down some wood, cut some wood, uh,
yeah, but that's
and
his career.
stuff.
He's fucking good at
But
it,
he would
and
have
he,
chosen it. Do you know what I mean? He could
yeah,
have chosen
yeah,
that. No, and the other thing as well is like I work in a job where we sell furniture, and a lot of the time the furniture to get it out of the houses that we collect them from, or to get it into the cars when people drop them off, they have to take them apart.
yeah,
Some when we get the we have some sort of like younger people working for us, some Saturday kids, and they rotate every couple of years. We get new ones in and whatever.
mm,
Not just them. Some of the older people that we have working for us. If you say to them, "Can you go and put together that bed? Can you go and put together that?"
mm,
I mean, not to sound insulting, but like I don't know their arse from their elbow.
yeah.
I mean, they don't know where to start. They don't know what's doing, and they don't know how to make the most of it. And it's like shit like that should not be difficult. Shit like that, and it's a confidence thing because they've never done anything like it
No,
as
absolutely.
much as anything.
But I'm having moments now in my adult life, like for example, I've helped my sister a couple of times do things in her house because she's having a baby. Like I had to put together a chest of drawers, which I'd never done before. I've had to help decorate and stuff like. But it's all things I should have been taught in school,
Mm.
or at least had some of the fundamentals taught to me in school that I could then apply them to the real thing.
And also taught,
Um,
taught things like okay, the list of not priorities, but the run check of things like if a light goes out, first thing you do, turn it off, check the bulb,
yeah,
change the bulb, put a new bulb in. If that still doesn't work, you go to the fuse. But that
yeah,
progression.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
How do you
absolutely.
restart a boiler? All that stuff.
Yeah,
That should be. How do you turn off? How do you know what the water, the mains water tap looks like when you go and turn off,
mm,
and it's got a name, and you see I've never been taught it, but I know where it is in our house, and I know to
yeah,
turn it off if there's a leak. But how do you all
yeah.
that
No,
stuff?
absolutely. I think from that sort of thing, just everyday practical stuff should be taught, like perhaps calling it home economics. Even things as simple as ironing, cleaning, things like that, that I
Mm.
think not necessarily that it's difficult to learn, but it's a
If you don't
mindset thing.
know,
I think it's more the mindset for me of like a lot of people see those sort of menial tasks as above them. Do you know, like they're above it? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
They don't.
yeah,
They shouldn't. So I think if at a young age you get kids used to doing sort of just boring shit, general life stuff. When they come out of school, it's not going to be like when they're, for example, for young boys. I still don't do a lot of my own ironing, but that's not a mindset thing. But like, there'll be a lot of guys out there that would demand their partner do their ironing, their washing, the washing, all those sorts of things. And I think it's changing a mindset at a young age that I'd like to see. Even if it's things like you get the kids to help clean the school, things like
yeah.
that.
You get
Sweeping up,
kids to
mopping
wash the
floors,
bibs,
things like
wash
that.
the.
All sort. Yeah, exactly. All those sorts of things because it humbles people as well.
Hmm.
So I'd
And they're
like to see
really
those sort of
useful.
things done. Um, I would like also cooking basics to be taught in school, even things as low down as boiling eggs, just very basic stuff. Again, it's just giving kids fundamentals to. I'm not expecting them to be able to come out of school and make full meals or anything like that, but just have the fundamentals and understand how appliances work and everything like that. So when they come out of school, it's just having them be more well-rounded.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I get that. I think there
Um,
are some basics, yeah, that probably do fall by the by,
because I feel,
fall by the
especially
wayside.
now, with how everything can be ordered at your fingertips, everything's within. a text away or an app away. I
And
feel like
actually, just a perfect opportunity to say that we actually did an episode on convenience,
no, absolutely we
convenience of
did,
modern lifestyle. So please go back and check that out. You won't
and
be
I feel a
disappointed.
lot of that is because
Did you know,
I
for
feel
example,
like
you can order goats. You can order someone to bring some goats to your house. That's a real thing. Go and check it out.
you
You
can
won't be
order a
disappointed.
mum as well, and that's not as dirty as it sounds. You can order a woman to protect,
I
well,
was
not
so disappointed. That
yeah,
service really let
it's
me down.
yeah, it's quite weird, but check that out. But yeah, just I'd like in general life basic skills to be taught in school. The amount of hours that get wasted in school on things like algebra and things like that, that for me, for the amount of few people, because there will be some people that use algebra in some sense in their life, and there'll be people that have gone on to be professors or people that work in the field of mathematics or things like that. But it's such a small amount, it feels like we neglect so many other
Yeah, it's a
areas
bit of a hard one for me
for such
on the
small
maths front,
percentages of
because I was always really good at maths and I was really quite enjoyed maths. I never liked
no,
my
but in
teacher,
terms of, you can
but
still
I quite
teach
enjoyed it. I
everything that
still enjoy
someone
it.
needs to learn in maths without needing to teach areas that don't need to be taught.
I know, but I liked them all, and I was quite pleased to be
No,
taught
but
them.
I feel like, for example, you're probably part of the 1% of kids that probably enjoyed learning things like algebra, but you're still not part of the
I did.
percentage that uses it in your
No,
everyday life.
well, I do use
Um,
it sometimes. Algebra, like it's a very basic form of algebra. I do use quite a lot 'cause it's an easy way to substitute. You know, rather than doing each individual calculation, you can sort of group them together, or you can do one formula that covers the lot. So I do still use.
all right, well, you're still part of a very small minority of people that
I know
would
what you
say
mean.
that. So I feel, and algebra is just an example. You could pick all sorts of things, like making
No, I know,
metal men in
I
DT,
know,
and
I
but I
know.
feel like we waste so much time in school on areas that perhaps aren't a priority, and ignore areas that probably are. Um,
I'll tell you where I'd skim some time off personally to make way for all this stuff we're doing. Um, One, and I have a huge area about, so I'm not going to get too into this because I have a huge thing about it. I'd skim back on history, and I'd definitely stop glamorizing. And this is more the media that does this in our schools, but I'd stop glamorizing and bigging up World War II and how great our little island was in going into battle. I
yeah,
feel like,
I think our national identity is very much bought into the idea of we're the world savers and Nazi beaters, and
and like the thing is we had a whole. I mean, I don't know whether they still do it. We're going back to primary school now. We had a whole Tudor week
mm,
where we all dressed up as Tudors and we all
yeah,
ate
yeah,
like Tudor foods, and it was like, do you know what though? If you ask anyone to name all the Tudor monarchs, I don't
oh,
fucking haven't got a clue. And
no,
also, when has that come in useful? I mean, right now, I will say this. To be fair, I'm actually reading, by sheer coincidence, Wolf Hall, the Hilary Mantel
okay,
novel
yeah, yeah,
about the rise of Thomas Cromwell.
yeah. Okay,
So in some ways, it is coming in a bit useful that I am somewhat familiar with the characters, and I
yeah,
know
yeah.
a little bit about sort of where they are and where they're going as well. But I mean, ultimately, it hasn't come into use. The other area I'd skim off of, and here's where I'd have a break in religious education, because I believe from a young age, yes, let's teach kids about the basics of religion and that there are different religions and how we can get along and the basic things they do. So, you know, this kid, for example, in your class won't eat these foods. This kid won't do any work on this day. This, you know, those kind of basic differences. But then I'd have a big break, teach a lot of other stuff, a lot of other, you know, life skills and stuff. And
Mm,
then once kids are old enough, so I'm talking key stage 4, so once they're kind of 14 and they're old enough to really understand a bit more the theological debates of religion,
yeah,
then go into it on a more theological aspect rather than the basic, look, kids, there are different religions and these kids, that let's go into a
yeah.
more
I mean,
theological debate and cover that in a more in-depth thing so that people have a more understanding of it and can respect each other a bit more. But in that bit in the middle, you don't need to continually learn that,
no, I think
for
if
me.
anything, what it needs to turn into is a discussion of the people that tend to follow that religion, so the societies, the cultures, how our relationship with them, how they've integrated into our society, things we've adopted, things they've adopted from us. I think that would make a massive difference in perhaps the prejudices against certain religions or certain cultures or certain people, if if the general public understood them better.
Yeah, also, I think between religion and history, you could also focus more on where a lot of the things we do in our day-to-day life and a lot of the things we believe in, where they come from, so that we can understand, or give kids the ability to understand, the absurdity of some of them, so that we can go,
Yeah,
we need to do this. And you go, why? Because someone decided years ago. Christmas, for example, because someone decided years ago that we should celebrate it on the winter solstice,
yeah.
rather than Jesus' birthday was not on the 25th of December. It was not that
Mm.
late in the year, but someone decided that the two should coincide and it should be moved to the winter solstice. And just having that kind of understanding, so people understand the absurdity of it, is just the stepping stones, the start to having a more enlightened society. And obviously, it's not going to be a blanket deal. It's not going to work for everyone, but it's
No,
going to help
absolutely.
more
I
and more
think
people.
even little things as silly as finding out that, Father Christmas wasn't always red. Like, he didn't always wear red. It was
Yeah,
green, and it was
absolutely.
Coca-Cola that made him red.
And
And
it was a
I tell you what,
marketing that
when I
changed it.
heard that, it fucking blew my mind, and I was like, "What the?" Because I learned that when I was an
just to
adult.
show
What the
just to
hell?
show that all our traditions that are set in stone and they need to be done this way, and
Yeah,
you can't have Santa wearing anything other than red. That's ridiculous. And you go, mate, it was just a marketing ploy that he
he was
wears red.
green.
It's like, what's the exactly, and it just kind of shows, it just starts to break down that wall, and the idea that all these things that have to be done this way absolutely don't.
I
They
think
didn't
a lot of
always
that
have to be
comes
done that
down
way.
to it's what people feel comfortable with as well, isn't it? It's what they know, it's what they understand.
No, and I
Um,
get that, but just kind of introducing it to them.
and well, no, absolutely. But I think the way that particular issue changes is if at a young age you make things easier for kids to challenge, or like you say, you teach them the history behind something so that they understand that isn't always how it was, or
And
things
like
can change and they do change and they have to change.
for
Um,
me, education is the long game. It's teaching this generation one thing, so that when they grow up, they're a little bit more understanding than the last
mm,
generation, and they impart that onto their kids. And between the home life and the education system, their kids grow up a little bit more enlightened than their previous generation,
yeah,
and they impart that then on their kids and you kind of work your way down. So you're kind of playing the game for way down the line, but you have to start
absolutely,
now here.
absolutely.
For me,
Absolutely. No, no, no. I couldn't
I'm just
agree
saying,
more.
if that was me, if that was, in
Um,
my
the
situation.
only thing I would disagree on, I do think we should teach history. I don't necessarily think we should cut down on it, but we should teach all sides of it, if that makes sense. So, if we're going to teach people about World War II and Winston Churchill, we need to tell the whole story of Winston Churchill. That yes, Hitler was a horrible person, but quite frankly, so was Winston Churchill.
And
Uh,
also, we have to teach the idea that Hitler actually, during an era of Great Depression, actually greatly improved the German
Now, see,
economy.
what I
Actually was
remember
quite a
that is
popular.
something I did get taught in school. They did cover that part. What
See,
they did in
I
my school
didn't.
was that when you were being taught about the rise of
No,
Nazism,
fair
you were
enough
being
then.
taught about how he revolutionised their car industry, for example, and made it more efficient and cheaper to build cars, and that stimulated their economy, and how popular and how good he did a job in terms of pre-Holocaust and World War II in terms of turning things around for Germany. So that was something I was educated on, but
No, fair enough then. Fair enough. But we certainly
because that was
glamorise ourselves for sure.
oh, absolutely. But that's from the beginning, is that's literally from day dot that happened, in my opinion. Um, and it's only as you get older you hear about our country like, well, not really that great, and we didn't do that many good things.
No, we should absolutely be taught the negative sides of the empire, and the fact that we sort of went around throwing our weight around for a good few hundred years.
Oh, absolutely. We thought we had a right to everything at any time.
Yeah, and I think all that stuff should be. As I said, I don't like history so much as I think we a lot of use shit. And as it should have been done in a month. We didn't need like a month to cover the. We didn't need a whole semester
No,
and have a whole dedicated to dress.
it definitely feels like if you look at our education system as a whole, it's very much a practice
No
of
one might it
what's
down.
palatable.
Sorry about that. So, not sure where that'll come out in the editing, but my internet just
Basically,
cut.
Jake's
Um,
parents himself are too cheap to get on the internet.
Yeah, no, it's really shit. It really is. But anyway, we were sort of talking about the fact that do we need as much time to discuss what we do in history?
But I
Uh,
think that what I was sort of saying before we started to cut out is it feels like when you look at our education system as a whole, it's very much what feels palatable, what we're comfortable with teaching people, and the message we want to give across rather than the whole story.
yeah, no, definitely. And I agree. I think we should be taught, but just in terms of making room for the other stuff, as much as, there is a lot to teach kids. And it's interesting that neither of us thought about cutting down on, literature, for example, which not a lot of people use. There aren't that many
Um,
people that read. That's the truth. I mean, not many
no,
people
that
read
is
for fun.
true. I think probably, I think one of the things we're most famous for across the years is our literature, our language. And I think as much time as we can devote to how complicated our language is, the better. Because I think even
No,
after
the
years
language
of,
aspect, sure, because it feeds
um,
into communication as well. But literally
I,
sitting there and going through a poem and go, what does the poet mean?
I um,
I found that perfectly good and sort of vaguely enjoyable. But do you know what I mean? In terms of
I
from a
think
literal
young
argument, could that be
particularly
made?
that helps feed creativity. Um, and again, it's thought provoking, it's debate, it's interpretation. And I think those are all
It's looking at
aspects
the
of a
bigger
child's
picture,
mind, yeah,
reading between the lines.
that part of a child's brain and anybody's brain should be fed and nurtured. And I think literature is something, whether it's our own or from around the world, it's definitely something that
I was
feeds that.
just sort of asking from sort of neutral point of view, how useful is it to dissect a poem?
How I feel about dissecting a poem.
No, no, how useful is it to dissect a poem?
Well, I
We're
think that,
talking about algebra, and you're saying how you never use it in the real world,
like I
and
said,
not
I think in terms of,
how much do you how when was the last time you looked at a piece of literature and dissected it
oh,
and analysed it?
I haven't since leaving school. That's the honest truth. But in terms of, I'd like to think things like that. I mean, I probably found them boring in school, but in terms of how I like to do things now, in terms of I do like to dissect things, I like to have things that are thought provoking. I like to read between the lines. I like to try and think of what's going on behind what's being said or what I'm seeing. And I think those sort of attitudes and ideas were fed at a young age, and it would have been through studying things like poems and literature. But equally, there's other ways of doing that, and you could probably make an argument for reducing the amount of time on it.
I think the only other thing as well that I would like to see added, and perhaps it can be covered in the citizenship umbrella, is and it's become more prominent and more needed in the last few years, is how to cycle your way through fake news, how to find an accurate source or a somewhat
Yeah,
reliable source, and how to, if you see a story, teaching kids, don't just go bang, that's the story, triggered, that's the story. Spend a couple of minutes looking into it, actually see if you can find
absolutely.
other sources. And
I think I'm starting to feel more sympathetic towards people though, because as we've seen with our own government and America's, the information that's given out isn't always true, or it's bent, or it's misleading, or so if you can't even trust your government, the people that are meant to be keeping you safe and be
mm,
honest with you, then who can you? But no, absolutely, I definitely think in a world of social media and platforms like ours
and
where people
should
give their opinions and
let me ask you that. Should that be taught at any point? A responsible use of social media? Because
yeah,
that
and I
is
thought,
now
to be
one of the
honest,
biggest
I think
things
you'd
in our
probably find
lives.
that is being taught. It gets taught in the workplace. It's being spoken about in wider society. So I'd be surprised if it isn't already
But
being
the only thing
introduced
about
in
that
some
is
way.
you've got to have the people teaching it have got to be as apt on these social media platforms as the kids.
Yeah, true. And the best way to do that would be to be in communication with younger people about how these apps are being used.
And it was just a sort of, as you said,
No, no,
it was like,
absolutely. I
should
think
that be
it should
being
be
taught? It
included.
should be. And
Um,
also, YouTube as a source, it's become far more of a thing than it was when we were at school. We had YouTube towards the end of our school days.
Yeah, but
I
it
mean, it
wasn't what it
was
is
in its
now.
infancy, really wasn't, but exactly.
No, absolutely. But I would be surprised if that isn't already being looked at or isn't on the cards. But no, definitely, I think that should be.
Yeah, no, Dan, I just think. And what would you put that under? Would you put that under citizenship, or would you put that under IT? Computing?
Or probably IT and computing. Yeah, I'd probably say that's a fair
Because
place to
as you
put it.
said, and again, I would say with you, that's one other place we can cut back is on the computing. Because as you said, these kids are growing up with it; they're so
Yeah, I think
into
the
it.
practical uses of it in terms of workplace learning programs, I would probably even say stuff like coding would probably need to be taught in
Yeah, I
IT
mean,
now because
when we were kids, you probably had to be shown a fair bit because
it was
we
all
weren't
new.
on it
I
all the
mean,
time. Like we had one computer at home that was shared
yeah,
between the
when I
family.
was in primary school, the year I left was the year they got computers. That was the first year they had computers in my school. And even then, there was only enough that a certain number of kids could use them, and I don't think I ever did when I was in primary school. And then when I got into secondary school was probably when I started getting introduced to computers.
Yeah, no, we needed like a more introduction to the whole
Yeah,
computing
well, I
world.
don't think that's the case
It's
now.
pointed in the direction, a lesson, two lessons. This is Excel. This is what you can do
Yeah,
with it. This is how you do it. And the thing with kids as well nowadays, and I myself do it with all these programs, is if you don't know, Google it. I mean, I know that's a cop out
yeah,
from the
no,
education
absolutely.
system. I get that, but we can certainly cut back on computing time to give way to all these other life lessons.
Oh,
Because the
absolutely.
fact is, school and I was all right at school, but it in no way prepared me for the real world. And also, just a little bit on mental health as well should be discussed, and it probably is
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
All that
Um,
stuff.
no, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think we'd be able to talk about this subject for as long as we had. I thought we would run out. But I think it
Showing your
probably.
faith. Do you know why he thinks that?
Well, no, do
Guys,
you
girls, and
know?
everything in between, because it was my idea. But he had no faith
No,
in anything
that
that had
isn't.
come out of my mind.
No, that isn't the case at all. It's when I've tried to sit down and think about things I'd like to add. I couldn't be, as we've discussed it, two people that both sort of came from the same period of education. I've sort of said to my mum in the past that she has no idea how bad my education was when I was at school, and that having this conversation with you now just reiterates it for me because there's so many fundamental areas in which I was left lacking when I came out of school.
Yeah, no,
Even in the
massively.
thing, even in the things they did teach, even in the things they did teach. So
Yeah, and part of that obviously relies on how much you apply yourself, and then how much you're
absolutely,
able to
I
naturally absorb.
I think there is a large chunk of people. I have an issue with our education system overall, but I can also accept that it works for enough people than it doesn't. And I think, unfortunately, I'm probably part of a percentage of people that doesn't work for particularly that well. The way in which I learn things, the way in which I absorb things, don't necessarily gel with the traditional ways of teaching a classroom of children.
Yeah,
So,
one other thing I would say as well is where I've talked about introducing, discussing the current political landscape and subjects like that. I think those should also be done because citizenship isn't at the moment. It's done in like form groups, which is a mix of abilities. I think stuff like that should be set up into sets in the same way that
oh,
English and
okay,
maths and science are. So I think
yeah,
the slower ones, for want of a better term, shouldn't be discussing anything too complex. They shouldn't be getting too involved, but just enough to introduce them. Whereas the faster ones and the more able ones are able to discuss far more advanced and complex ideas and topics.
I don't know. I feel slightly uncomfortable with that. I feel slightly uncomfortable with that. I think that sort of, to a degree, feels like the system we have now, where sort of the people that are considered more intelligent run things, and then you've got the people that don't
Yeah,
understand
but they're
things at the
not
bottom.
intelligent. We know they're not intelligent. They're just
No,
working
I
backwards.
understand that, but that's it starts that from a young age feels like it's creating the idea of, oh, you stupid kids, you're not really advanced enough to learn about
No, and
these.
maybe you're right. Maybe upon consideration, if I want this ideal world where we engage with each other and respect that some people have different views, perhaps I should also be looking to engage and respect other people that are operating at
But
different
that,
levels.
but I suppose that part of it is sort of some people need more attention than others. So you might have a mixed form group that you have a few people that do need more attention. Like I was the sort of person I couldn't. A teacher would normally, like for example, in maths, a teacher would give you a problem on the thing. You'd get your textbook. They'd explain how to work out the first one, and then you'd have to go through the textbook and work out the rest. And that was sort of the way you did it. Whereas I would need perhaps to go over with the teacher like 2 or 3 more times to understand it, and then I could, once I fully understood it. But it normally took sometimes several times for me to understand what was being taught.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I found doing it was the way I tend to learn it. So I would need to sit with the teacher, do it with them, and then once I'd done that, normally I could wrap my head around it. And that was sort of the way I was with most things I was learning. But being in the class of 30, 35 kids, you don't always get that.
No, that's fair. And to offer an alternative, I was very much the opposite as a student. Once I'd seen a teacher go through it once on the board, I'd rattle through
Yeah,
it. The textbook,
exactly, and
absolutely fine.
that's completely fine. And I don't even think it's necessarily an intelligence thing. It's just the way.
No,
Like, I would
it's
say you're probably
not.
more
It's
intelligent than
not.
me anyway.
No,
But
I wouldn't.
I would say there's just a difference in way which people learn things, and mine's very much a
That's exactly it.
practical. I need the practical element to it. Having someone just show me 9 times out of 10, I won't learn it. I need to sort of do it with them.
And that's the other debate that's not necessarily, I know it feels like it could be for this episode, but it isn't for this episode, but it could be its own thing, is that, exams, for example, there's a lot of very intelligent people that don't do very well in exams and are shown up to be unintelligent because of their
Mm,
exam results, whereas there are a lot of people who aren't that intelligent. They're just good at exams.
yeah,
Really what an exam tests is not how intelligent you are or how much you understand the subject. It tests how good you are at exams.
yeah.
I mean,
I, but I think for me, I can accept that our education system works for more people than it doesn't. So I have to sort of just accept that's just the way it was. And the only way I'd have ever got round me not being good at school was if I'd have applied myself. But instead, I got disheartened by the fact I didn't understand things straight away, and then I lost interest. Um, and perhaps if the education system was better funded and there was more teachers and less kids in one classroom, it might have been different. But
I don't know,
it's
because I
just the
always feel
way.
like, for me, and now we are sort of showing a bit, but like for me, I was never great at exams because I don't
Mm,
have the focus, I don't have the attention span to sit through. Even though the exam's like an hour and a half, I don't
mm.
have that, man. That's not going to happen. I'm going to be staring at a wall for so much of it. And like I remember doing biology, not biology, chemistry at AS level,
Yeah,
and in the classroom, I nailed it. Like
yeah,
literally, she put an example on the board, and then, like I said, I'd rattle through the textbook, and it'd all be correct, and everything would be absolutely right. But when it came
yeah.
to the exam, I knew everything, but I wasn't very good at expressing that in the exam.
Okay.
So I didn't come away with a very great result. And yet I feel that actually over at the end of year 12, year 12, I actually feel like I was very competent in chemistry,
Yeah.
but the exam absolutely did not reflect that. Do you know what I mean? So
No, no,
I'm not sure
absolutely.
it does. And I know you said a lot of people doesn't before. I think there is a discussion to be had on that.
Oh, absolutely. But to be honest, I doubt they ever will, or certainly not in our lifetime.
Not soon, anyway. As they've got a lot
No.
of other things on their plate,
Yes.
for
But
sure.
no, I think this has been quite a good topic to
It's been
discuss,
interesting
actually,
to
and I've
us. We
enjoyed
hope it's
it.
been to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not been amusing or anything like that. It's been quite serious, but we do have quite a few listeners who've said they prefer it when we're
No,
more
and we've done
serious.
the
And
last couple we did were a bit lighter and a bit
yeah,
fun. So
yeah,
it's nice to kind of go
um,
into something a bit more.
and have a more serious discussion.
Yeah, no,
So no, I've
absolutely.
enjoyed this. Hopefully, our listeners have made it this far. Um, as always, guys, let us know what you think. You can find us at Swords Crossing on Twitter, at Crossing Swords on Facebook, at Crossing Swords _ podcast on Insta, and Crossing Swords 19 at gmail.com.
Yes, and
And that will be somewhere along here on the screenage. Normally, it's around the bottom right corner, about there.
here, here,
Yeah,
here, here, here,
it's
all
somewhere.
around here.
Do you know what I
The
mean?
only thing about the emails is as well, and we have had a couple of emails from people that date back about a month or so now at this point of recording. We are looking to get back to you. We do apologise for not getting back sooner.
Yes, we
We
haven't
didn't want to
ignored you.
just we didn't want to just get back to you. We wanted to have a kind of game plan in mind when we came to you. So we are working on that, and we will get back to you guys. So please don't feel like you can't message us because we're not. We do respond just
Yes,
when we feel it's right, when we feel like there's time.
absolutely. And on that note, everyone, stay safe. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
that's it.
more relevant than ever at these times to stay safe.
Yeah. And look after yourselves. Love you guys.
Hi guys.